Controversies are not new for St. Thomas Christians. There is controversies between churches regarding the history regarding St. Thomas. Along with this, we have a controversy on a cross. A cross that some people claim that is a Persian cross, some people claim that is a St. Thomas cross, that means a cross made by St. Thomas himself, and other people claim that a cross was made by Manichaeans, and some other people claim that it was made by some Gnostic Christians who came to South India in the 8th century. Fact is, a traditionalist fraction of the church using this as their ancient symbol, and another fraction is claiming that this is not even a Christian cross. Here we are discussing and trying to find out what is the mysteries behind this cross and what is the mysterious inscription around it. Dr. Brunel was the first one to propose the hypothesis of Gnostic origin of this cross. In order to understand why Brunel needed to connect this cross with the Gnostics or Manichaeans, we need to study his argument, especially one like Vedanta Hinduism from Persian Gnostic sects in South India. In order to find out why Brunel made an inscription reading like this one, we need to look at his own book. One of his observations is like this one. Very remarkable that all the greatest reformers of Indian Hinduism were born near Persian settlement. Shankaracharya near Kodungalur, Ramanujaraya near Madras, and Madhavaraya at Kalyana. The only original South Indian poet, Thiruvalluvar, was a native of Sandom. In his sister's book, the Christian influence are very evident to a casual reader. The resemblance between Christianity and the South Indian schools of Hinduism are very evident and complete if the systems of Mani and the Gnostics are considered. Point is that Mr. Brunel is trying to prove that the Persian Gnostic influenced the South Indian Christians as well as Hindus of that time, and by their influence, the reformations in Hinduism happened, like Shankaracharya learned Vedanta Hinduism, the reformations from Persian Gnostics. It is true that the greatest reformers of South India were born near Persian settlements, like Adi Shankara near Kodungalur, and Sri Ramanuja near Madras, and Basava near Kalyana, and Thiruvalluvar near Sandom. But what Brunel is suggesting is that these reforms of modern South Indian Hinduism influenced or even originated from some Persian Gnostic sects in South India, or simply Vedanta Hinduism originated from Persian. This is actually a hilarious statement. Now it's clear that Dr. Brunel translated this inscription with the biased mind to support Weber, his friend. This is not a blind acquisition, but read the opinion of other scholars about Brunel's own translation. Jivan Jamshedji Modi, he was the president of the Asiatic Society in 1924, mentioned the following about Brunel's translations. Dr. Brunel's interest in the discovery of the Pallavi inscriptions was from the point of view of supporting Professor Weber, who had, in his essay on Ramayana, suspected Greek influence in this composition of that poem. He said, it will now, in consequences of the discovery, be possible to prove much in the modern philosophical schools in India come from some form of Christianity derived from Persia. And this fact at once explained and also the origin of modern Vedanta sects in South India exclusively. Now again, if we are going back to Dr. Brunel's book itself, it's clear that he has quoted, I can only offer the above as a contribution towards showing how this result can be brought about. That means Brunel has translated all this inscription to support his friend's hypothesis that some Gnostic or Manichaean came from Persia and influenced the Christian here and the Hindus. And the Hindus took all these Gnostic and Persian ideas and made Vedanta Hinduism. Here we have to see that for Brunel, in order to support his friend's hypothesis, he need to prove the presence of Gnostic or Manichaeans in South India. Their number large enough to influence the Hindu community. As far as we know that there is no reliable document or archaeological evidence available to prove the presence of Gnostics or Manichaeans in South India. So Brunel simply turned towards the ancient Christian community of South India, that is the St. Thomas Christians, and their most ancient Christian emblem, that is the Persian crosses. According to him, the early Persian settlers in this area were probably Manichaeans or Gnostics. The transition from Manichaeanism or Gnosticism to Nestorianism, that is the East Syrian Church, took place in South India in 11th or 12th century AD. The changeover from Pallavi to Syriac proved this shift. As far as the history is concerned, Dr. Brenner's interpretations and suggestions regarding the origin of Christianity is completely wrong, because in 550 AD itself, an Egyptian traveler called Cosmos Indicopletus has categorically stated that even in the island of Tabrone, that is present-day Sri Lanka, in the furthest India, where the Indian Sea is, there is a church of Persian Christians who have settled there, and they have a bishop who is appointed from Persia and a deacon and a complete rituals. But the natives and their kings are heathens, and such also in the case in the land of Malay, that is present-day Malabar, where the pepper grows, and in a place called Kalyana, there is a bishop appointed from Persia as well. This is the same case with the island of Discosaurus, that is present-day Socotra Island in the Indian Ocean. Here we can clearly see that Cosmos specifically stated that there is a church with the Persian settlers, and the Christians have a bishop appointed from Persia. They have a church and a complete Christian rituals. Now we can clearly see that in the 550 AD itself, we have Christian presence in South India, with most probably a bishop appointed from Persia. Persia proper means present-day Iran, not Syria or Iraq, and these Christians most probably used Pallavi as a religious language and not Syriac. Now again coming back to the subject, Manichaeanism, whether these crosses are Manichaeans or Christians, first we need to look at what Manichaeanism is. Manichaeanism was basically a propagandist movement founded in 3rd century by a Persian named Mani. His enterprising missionaries spread the word of his religion throughout the world. But we can see the following sentence from Dr. Brennell's book. The first historical notice of a mission to India we have is that of Persians who were Manichaeans. It's uncertain, though not improbable, that Mani himself preached in India, because one of his books was written as the Greater Epistle to the Indians. It is also appears probable that one of his disciples came to the country. It is not unreasonable to suppose that many migrated to India and Ceylon. Without some such event, it is difficult to understand how Christians become so numerous in the southern India during the Middle Ages. That means Dr. Brennell is so excited to know how the Christians become so numerous in South India. He strongly suspects that it's because of Manichaean convert. Again, another problem with the Manichaean origin hypothesis of this cross is that the inscriptions were written in book Pallavi. Before going any further, we need to analyze the scripts in which the inscriptions were written. Here we have to compare 3 scripts. The first one is a book Pallavi used in the inscription of the cross. Second one is a specific Manichaean script which is used by Manichaean sect to write anything of sacred nature. The third one is less known, Psalter Pallavi. Book Pallavi is a written system used by the Zoroastrian and also the ancient Persian Christians. The inscription around the cross is written in this particular script. The second one is a Manichaean script and is a sibling of early Pallavi script. Like Pallavi, it is developed from Imperial Aramaic. Manichaean script is so named because Manichaean text attributes its origin to Mani himself. The Manichaean scribes consider the script as a sacred instrument. It was protected from the evolution of Pallavi script underwent because Manichaeans attributes the origin of this script to Mani himself. Hence, it's a more archaic than book Pallavi. Now we have a problem. The Manichaean religion has its own script to write Middle Persian because they think that their founder himself used this script, but our crosses have Pallavi written in Middle Persian. Now again going back to Dr. Brennell's book, we can see the following sentences. If the inscriptions were Manichaeans, it would have probably in a peculiar character. He is specifically skipping the point that if the inscriptions were Manichaean, they would have written it in their own Manichaean sacred script. Unfortunately, the script was written in book Pallavi, which the Manichaeans consider as an inferior script to write anything of sacred nature. So if these crosses were actually made by Manichaeans, why wouldn't they written in Manichaean script around it? It was in book Pallavi. It's a contradiction in his own book. The third script is a Satar Pallavi script and is written on a positional cross in Afghanistan, means that the Christians of that particular area may have used it as a medium of communication and for religious purpose. But Fars, which is located near Iraq-Iran border, which is far from Afghanistan, so the Christians in this area may have used this Middle Persian. So we need further studies on the scripts used by the Persian Christians for further information on this subject. But one thing we can sure about is that these inscriptions were not written by Manichaeans, that is for sure. Now we have to look at other interpretation on this cross. Just after Dr. Brunel's interpretation was published, Dr. Martin Hogg attempted and reading the translations of the cross. His translation is like this one: He who believe in the Messiah and in God on high and also in the Holy Ghost is in the grace of him who bore the pain on the cross. This is actually a different translation comparing to that of Dr. Brunel. Now the first part look like a Trinitarian formula, and regarding the second part, it has some similarities with the Christology of Mar Isaac of the Nineveh. Another interpretation of the same inscriptions made by Hals and Sajina in 1892 and 1914. He who is the Messiah, the reconciler, the resurrected, forever purified by virtue of his crucifixions. Now we have another interpretation by Dr. Jivanji Jamshedji Modi. The inscription at Kadamatam Church was translated as, I, the beautiful bird of Nineveh, has come to this land, written by me Shaffer, who was saved by the Holy Messiah from misery. Now we have a commentary on this cross by Jivanji Jamshedji Modi. He was the president of the Asiatic Society of India. He quoted the following: I think that there is a reason to believe that these crosses were not put up by Manichaean Christians or Christian Manichaeans, because the history of the Manichaeans and their offshoots shows us that the Manichaeans were persecuted by other Christian sects on the ground that they were not true followers of the Christ. Manichaeism was a mixture of Zoroastrianism, Christianity and even Buddhism. One may say that in spite of their not being true Orthodox Christians, they believed in Christ. But what we know of the tenets of Manichaeanism does not permit us to believe that they had a faith in the personality of Christ as a redeemer of afflictions, as seems to have been evinced by the offerers of this cross in question in the Pallavi inscription. So I think that the Christians who offered these crosses were Christians who are to leave Persia like the Zoroastrians, to escape from the persecution of the Arab invaders of Persia. I therefore think that the crosses may be offering of some of the Christians who had come to the shores of India in the middle or later part of 7th century and the 8th century, owing to the persecution of the Arab, and in referring to the afflictions of Christ, they allude their own afflictions of being compelled to leave their country for their faith. Now in 1925 we have another interpretation of this ancient inscriptions by CPTC Wingworth. As far as we know, this interpretation by Professor Wingworth was accepted by many scholars and not really challenged. The inscriptions is read as follows: My Lord Christ, have mercy upon Aphras, son of Sharbok, the Syrian, who cut this or who caused this to be cut. Here we have a final translation that seems to be accepted by many scholars to this day, that is, My Lord Christ, have mercy upon Aphras, son of Sharbak, the Syrian, who cut this. But very interesting to note that a Christian copper plates, that is a Tarisapalli copper plate, is given to the Christians of Kollam in the 9th century AD by the Hindu kings of Kerala. Here we have a witness named Aphras, son of Sharbak. That means whoever made these crosses in the first place may have some kind of a connection with the Tarisapalli Chepad of 8th century, or something to do with Mar Sapor and Afroth, who believed to be the two Persian saints who come to the shores of Kerala in the 8th century and respected by St. Thomas Christians as the holy ones or the Kanti Shangal. So the interpretation made by Wingworth met with immediate acceptance. The reservations on minor points, it has never been radically challenged. So attempts to end profound theology, Nestorian, Manichaean or whatever it is, have to be abandoned. it turns out to be not more than the expression of natural and rather simple piety. And for the first millennium of Christianity, that is from 1st century AD to 10th century AD, all we have is a connection with the Christians of Persia, that is present day Iran, nothing with the Syrians or Syriac Christianity as we claim today. Today we don't have any Christians in Persia or Iran who use Book Pahlavi. Like Zoroastrians who have fled to the western India, we have Christians of Persia who have fled to the southern India and settled here. These crosses are most probably a tomb crosses or a cross placed over a burial place. That is the reason why these crosses were found abandoned. Many people claim that these crosses were abandoned, but that is not true. People have placed this cross over a burial place, and over the time people have missed that locations. Now we have to look at other possibilities. Here we have some kind of a cross representations from different places like Armenia, Rome and other areas. Here we can see the representation of a cross and a dove descending upon them. Interesting to note that the high resemblance of this Persian crosses with the Armenian stone crosses, that is Kachka, is high, and a further study on this subject need to be done, because these Christians may have been taken the base model for this cross from Armenia, because they have the flowery edges, the dove descending symbolism, the flowery bottom. In order to find all these things, we need further study on this subject and approach this subject with open-mindedness, rather than simply branding this cross as non-Christians or Manichaean. One need to identify the true origin of this cross by analyzing similar crosses and samples from other parts of Asia, especially in present-day Iran, Azerbaijan or Armenia. Also, we should seek help from other archaeological departments in this country and approach them for further investigation on the origin of these crosses.